Domenique Harrison is a licensed psychotherapist, the founder of the Racial Equity Therapist, and the creator of the Racial Equity Therapist Presents the Conversations Deck, a 150 discussion card deck to spark authentic conversations exploring histories, identities, relationship dynamics, and experiences while fostering healthier connections. With a master's degree in public health and clinical psychology and licenses in marriage and family therapy and professional clinical counseling, Dominique specializes in working with Black millennials and couples at the intersection of race and relationships. She believes that individual wellness is intertwined with healthy relationships, and her work in and out of the therapy room reflects that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Unfolding, presented by the Love Foundation. I'm your host, Rachel Keener, and today I'm joined with Domenique Harrison, my friend. How are you? Happy Black History Month. Happy Month of Love.
Yes.
How you doing?
Oh, I am doing so well, Rachel, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with you today. And whatever we get into, a little kiki, a little vulnerability, I'm just excited. And thank you. Happy Black History Month. Happy Month of Love to you too.
Thank you. Thank you. No, it's like, I love February, and it's like always been there, but I just forgot about how much I loved it. Like, it's Black History Month. We have Valentine's Day. It's like a leap year. It's leap year this year. So it's like a hint of magic in it too.
Yes.
It's just like, it always feels like the new year starts in February. Cause like January, you're just like catching up from the holidays, recovering, just figuring life out. And then February's like, okay, now we start. And I always love that energy that February brings. So I'm just happy to be here. But
I'm with you.
Thank you. But with that, Love Foundation, Month of Love, I want to start. The first question is, what is your earliest memory of love?
Oh, I love this question so much. So I have wonderful relationships with my family. And so love is literally how I sit, story, feel into my relationships with my twin sister and my parents. I was given so much love throughout childhood, and I'm still given so much love. Love is in the words that my parents have used to care for me, to comfort me, to hold me. Love is in the hugs that my mom gives me. Oh my gosh, she gives such good hugs. And to the point where I think I now am on the caliber of giving good hugs because I've received so many good hugs from her. I also will say that love is in the connectedness that I have with my sister. I talk about it all the time, but she's my person. Yes, she has her own person. She is married, but she is my person. I think she would say the same too. And it is just in the risks that we take, like we actually take healthy relational risks with one another. That feels like love. Love is also in me feeling like I can stand in my integrity about who I am, whether or not someone is judging. Love is like, oh, I feel comfortable standing up for who I am and doing that with my family. So usually love it always takes me back to my family for sure.
I love that. And the way you describe love is so beautiful and so poetic, and it makes sense why you help people with love. Like, it seems like it was truly your calling. What led you to that call?
Thanks, Rachel.
Just calling.
What led me to this calling? So, interestingly enough, I have always really valued relationships. And whether it is how I've seen, some people in my life, like, for example, my sister is a really good friend. And I saw that from when we were growing up. She was always open and a risk taker to support people. And so I think I value that. I always had value around relationships. And when I became a therapist, though, it was interesting. Most folks don't get the opportunity in their intern years to see as many couples, but I just was blessed to see all these couples. And I was like, this is kind of my sweet spot, ain't it? And I just noticed that I had fun. I loved it. It was play. It was also, it invited me to like embrace conflict in a new way. I liked that it challenged me. It still does. It makes me slow down and think. It gives me all the things that I think I value about work. And that is a little bit of play, a little bit of challenge, and a lot of continual learning. So I think it's all wrapped up in there. And one of the things that I really, really value is that the biggest component of relationship and relationship work is learning as much about yourself and inviting yourself to learn a lot about others so that you can be in great connection, in relational closeness, in intimacy with another person, but also like really understand what it means to remain in that harmony, disharmony, repair cycle. And it's just beautiful. It's fun work. It's rewarding work. It's risk-taking work. So yeah, I love it. I really do.
Oh, that's beautiful. I feel this is so on topic for like everything we're going to talk about. You like hit all the like the buzzwords I want to use in this conversation today. I was like, ooh, which one do I pull off of? But in this like conversation focusing on like relationships and romantic relationships and what they mean and how they define us and how we navigate through them, kinda. I feel like we hear so many things about like what love is, what healthy love is, and like you mentioned, like taking risk in love. Just what is a healthy risk in love? Like what do you see your clients and the couples you help with come with you like needing help with? Like what do you see like the main thing, the key thread in all the couples, or if there is one?
Yes. Okay. This is such a good question. And I think about it often. Really, healthy risk in love is really about knowing that you have the opportunity to stand in your integrity, to teach someone about you and to learn and lean into understanding about others and take risk in order to become relationally closer to someone. More than anything, I think the world, societal narratives have kind of led us to fear closeness through learning, through, making mistakes, through taking risks. But I am of the mind that our mind and body are primed for certain risks that many of us haven't actually taken yet. And we need to give ourselves the opportunity to do so. What that looks like is I'm telling people all the time, like, you got me. Let's practice these conversations that you've been preventing yourself from having because you're fearing something. And just like, let's do it. And let's see what comes up. And let me tell you what I see. And then you get to be really clear about what you're noticing. And let's learn what bodily symptoms come up as you are taking this risk to share something vulnerable about yourself. And let's make a story of it. Let's make meaning of it. Let's invite your partner into that conversation so that they know what's going on, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing as you're talking about yourself or you're talking about them. So really, relational risk taking for me and healthy relational risk taking is about standing in your integrity, knowing when is a time to share something that feels hard or feels important or feels exciting, not shying away or silencing ourselves and relying on assumptions just because we've known each other for years, right? Like leaning into intuition, but also asking questions and being continually curious. And curiosity for me is like how you lean into the expansive part of your relationship rather than the scarcity part that's like limiting beliefs, black and white thinking. The curiosity part is like, ooh, I know I kind of sense this about them, but let me ask if that's what's really going on. And let me just take a risk and let me learn a little bit more about them and have fun learning about them and not just continue to rely on what I believe is a truth just because we've been doing this thing called life and relationship for years. Yeah, it's a lot of that and trusting and knowing that the things that we value, take a risk.
Take a risk. Okay. In that vein. So to be honest, I love love. I love the idea of love. I truly believe it is what makes the world go around. Like I feel like love is like the core of our being, and it comes in so many forms and there's so many ways to experience love. And I've always been drawn to experiencing love, like whether that be through like friendships or family or even like at this job where I'm literally working at the Love Land Foundation. It's not lost on me how much I'm just like, oh yes, love, like this mug. I love love, but there's always been like a disconnect for me when it comes to romantic love. And you touched on it briefly about like vulnerability and what that means. And every year, my family and I come up with words and how we want to move throughout our year. So like last year, my words were trust and gratitude. And this year, my words are fun and vulnerability and how they go hand in hand with each other. And really trying to practice vulnerability in romantic settings and romantic relationships. And it's scary. Like, it's so scary. It's hard to like be open all the time because it's like you said, like there's a risk to it. And then, but I'm starting to see there's more so a risk of regretting not going for it or not being who I truly am in these settings, you know, and just trying to like face myself, face my fears and figure out how to just show up as like my true self to like meet and like engage with other people as our true selves. Cause then like, if we can't be ourselves, like what's the point, you know? But yeah, I say all that to say, I was reading your article and there's mention of love languages and attachment styles. So I was like, oh, okay, great. I'm pretty sure my love languages, they change. My love languages change based on like who I'm with and like the stage of the relationship we're in, you know? And so like, but usually I love like words of affirmation, acts of service and gifts. Like that's really where like I like find myself a lot. Just like the thought of like being seen and considered and like known, like that really stands out to me. And so I was like, okay, let me do my attachment style. And so I take the attachment style quiz and, you know, we all strive for secure attachment. That seems to be the goal. And that seems to be so wonderful and stuff. But, I got the results and they were like anxious and preoccupied. And I was like, oh, like I was not expecting that one. But it was very eye-opening. And you mentioned talk about attachment styles and I would just love, you know, some help with understanding that and like what you think of attachment styles if you have any thoughts.
Yes. Yes, I do have thoughts and I just want to honor you for a second, right? Like there's nothing more valuable than sitting with new knowledge about ourselves, but it can also be a bit disheartening if we put a moralizing label on what anxious attachment style looks and feels like. What I will say though is usually what happens around attachment is these are the things that we see to the extreme when we are in threat in our relationship. When I mean in threat, that means when we are in a threat response that looks like fight, flight, or freeze, when we are in the top frame of our mind where we're actually more self-protective than connected. So anxious attachment is more of like when you're not resourced enough, you will find yourself doing things that are a smidge boundaryless or a smidge like in shame or maybe even grandiose. Like these are the things that kind of show up. But essentially what I want to explore around attachment styles is that, they're supportive for people. Like they give you some sort of answer to what you've been seeking about why you might be connecting with certain people in certain ways. What I would advise folks to do when they get their answer is explore, okay, how much of this do I believe? Where do I see this showing up? In which relationships do I see it showing up? And if I'm extremely honest with myself, right, I don't have to sit in this place of judgment. I can actually see, okay, so what do I want to do with it now? Do I have a dream of transitioning myself from anxious to secure? Absolutely. And are there things that I can do that will transition me from anxious to secure? Absolutely. And so it's just getting clear about what are some skills, then practices, then traits, then states, right? Meaning, how can I get myself to practice the things that I want and do it with intention so that I can see myself start to take on these secure attachment behaviors that feel good and feel resonant with who I want to be in new relationships. So I'd say, yes, explore it. Be curious with the answer you get. Strip away any judgment about the answer itself, right? And be in space with people where you can talk about it. Maybe even ask a friend, okay, so I got this attachment style of anxious attachment. And here are some of the characteristics. Now, when you do have a conversation like this, be curious, right? Be curious and say, I want to actually be curious with you. Do you see these behaviors in me? And if so, like when? When do you see these things coming up? If you are if you have really good family relationships, maybe a sibling who you're really close to, it would be so good to be like, let's take this quiz together. Let's see what we get. Let's talk about it. Let's explore it with one another. Let's see how these behaviors happen in our relationship or happen throughout our family system. If you are in a like a romantic partnership, I'd say do the same. Like talk about it, explore it, inviting curiosity around the conversation. Don't make it so tied to judgment. And you don't have to say that this is the only story of me. More than anything, I think that's what gets us kind of tied up in anxious or like attachment styles in general, is that we place this as the long-standing narrative about who we are it's parts of us. It's all tied to family of origin, how we saw things in interactions with our parents, like whether it's the things that they embodied or the things that we were like, absolutely not. I don't want to do those. And I oppose those and I do the opposite. It's such a composite of so many different interactions. So I will say that. And there are things that we can do in order to transition ourselves with more interaction from the like more of the challenging attachment styles to the secure one.
I love that. No. Last month I went to a friend's birthday party and we were just having lots of conversations of like, and I like went to it being like, oh, I'm like a pretty open person. I'm pretty vulnerable, you know? And then like I was in the setting and I was like, oh, like I'm definitely not as open as I thought I was. And I had to like sit with that for a second. And I asked my friend it was her birthday and I was like, oh, like, am I like closed off? And like, I was like, just asking, confiding in her and like, cause I was feeling some ways. And she was like, you have moments where you can be definitely, but like when you open up and when you lean into more, like it really does like shine, you know? And so someone I trust, I took her information and I was like, okay, for the rest of the weekend, I'm just going to try leaning in more and see what happens, you know? And like, if it gets too much, I could pull back, you know? So I did that and I noticed such a shift in myself and a shift in the relationships that I was forming. Like I felt like I was actually able to connect with people more by opening up more, you know? And I just was like, oh, like what other ways can I apply this in my life where I could just, like you said, like take a healthy risk of like allowing myself to be seen and be heard, because it's so easy for us to like silence and minimize ourselves. And it's like I'm constantly unlearning to like not do that anymore, you know, and just like be discerning about who I share myself with, but like in that space. And so I guess like ways of practicing vulnerability in relationships and like why vulnerability is so important in relationships, you know?
Yeah. So you know this, especially because I write about vulnerability a lot. It's like a core belief for me in the work that I do, in the way that I live my personal life. And I want to say this, right? Like, I think we are all vulnerable, but the parts of us that are saying that we're not are just the parts of us that are showing up in that moment where vulnerability feels scary, like we're afraid of it, or we're afraid about like what it means to be vulnerable in a certain moment. But I'd say there are moments in our lives where we tap into vulnerability, and that could be we say something and speak up in anxiety or in contentment, or we speak up and say something with bravery, or like we are shaking in our boots around the thing we say. The vulnerability for me, and I often talk about it, is like it's a state of being open and acknowledging our needs to the people who like would really benefit from hearing them. Like, I think that people need to hear the truth of our narrative, the truth of our existence, right? Like people need to know what we like, what we want, what we desire from them in community with them, right? This is how we really build interdependence. And, you know, vulnerability for me is really like practicing our truth, practicing trusting our voice. And this is a word I often use all the time, like in every conversation almost, and it's congruence. And it's vulnerability is an opportunity for us to be congruent internally and externally. Our thoughts that we have are being shown in the behaviors and the actions that we do. And when we are actually more vulnerable and more congruent, we are actually less anxious with the world, because we are not leaving a situation believing that, you know, I didn't say the thing that I needed to say, or vulnerability is an opportunity to be like, yeah, my emotions were all over the place, but you know what? That content, I said it. It's like, yeah, it was said, right? And we're not, when we do more of that, and again, that's about practice. Like that's about like giving ourselves the opportunity to just, even on a small scale, just be vulnerable about a small truth with people we trust, right? Start with people you trust. But really one of the heart of the challenge of vulnerability and like our fear around it in relationships is like, if we are too vulnerable, sometimes there's a fear that what we show, what people hear from us will be something that gets us disconnected from them or out of alignment with them in relationship, right? And we're scared of this grief that could come with that. We're scared of the feelings that could be felt when we're vulnerable. And, you know, we absolutely know that grief is not the only thing that we'll experience. We know that like there's going to be contentment, there's going to be excitement, there's going to be laughter, there's going to be joy, but it's the negative or the negative leaning emotions are always more prominent in our brains and in our bodies than the positive leaning ones. So we say, I'm going to avoid grief because I think, you know, it's better for me to be in this experience where I'm not feeling that than for me to step up and risk feeling that. But we, you know, the risk thing, it's like there's so many things that could happen. And also we just need to practice it a lot so we can have more opportunities where the risks are leading to an amalgamation of emotions. So
it's not always bad.
It's not always bad.
It's not always bad. And that's so funny you say that because a lot of times fear stops us and me, I'm talking about myself, from like trying new things or seeing something through or like just being like, oh, it's better to just play it safe. Stay on this side. Like it's good over here. We don't have to worry about getting hurt. But then you also are like robbing yourself of experiencing a joy and like that excitement or like pleasure, you know? So it's kind of just like, you kind of just have to like roll the dice and see what happens, you know? But I think a lot of talk goes with like how to be like relationship ready or like how to like get yourselves in like the right mindset to be in a relationship. Is that true? Like, is there a way to ever be like ready for a relationship? Like, or is it just like, if it finds you, it finds you and then you just figure it out, you know?
Yeah. So I love this question because I often think about readiness. And for one thing, readiness is how you define it, right? All of us might define our individual readiness based off of a set of experiences, certain emotions that we feel, our understanding of those emotions, our understanding of our body responses. But more than anything, our feeling of readiness can fluctuate. Our feeling of readiness changes sometimes. And if you're really present, you might notice that readiness changes from day to day. But like readiness changes from season to season. But for me, it's funny when I think about what I see in the therapy space, when I am working with Black women and other women of culture and color, I always think, okay, this is a sign that they're ready. And that is they're out of scarcity mindset more. They're more into expansion. And what I mean by that is they're more into curiosity. They're flexible. They are tapping into the interest that they love, but also holding space for community. They are in community as much as possible. They are stepping away from like individualism and moving into communal support and interdependence. Readiness to me also looks like they're acknowledging that all feelings that they have are valid. They're not judging themselves as much, but also they are clear about their unreconciled, you know, or unresolved experiences that they've had in past relationships. They are checking in on themselves about what patterns of relationships have been carried over from other relationships. They have done their lists, and sometimes it looks like, what are my boundaries? What are my needs? What are the things that I know I need, whether it's alone time on certain days. If I get into a new relationship, what are the conversations that are like I have to have when it comes to a new partner? So it's about built awareness. It's about the activation of that awareness. It's about curiosity. It's about living into expansion rather than scarcity mindset. It's about joy. Like, I know folks who are ready, cause they are embracing joy and they're experiencing joy. But readiness is also like, the acknowledgement that, oh, I'm grieving a little bit of what I could have had, but I know the grief is there. And I can look to this new relationship as an opportunity to learn more about myself, learn more about this person, to feel in community with someone else, to have an adventure with someone else. So those are some of the things, which it sounds like a lot of things I just said, but those are some of the things about readiness.
Yes, more. But no, I think that's so beautiful because this is like before you get in a relationship. And so once you're in a relationship, I feel like a whole new whirlwind of like questions and like emotions come up and like needs that you don't even realize were needs in the first place. But like the one thing I think about is like, how do you maintain like your individualism, like how do you maintain like who you are, but also who you are in a relationship and like maintaining that relationship while maintaining your relationship with yourself and everything that like made you. Like, do you like, like people are like, oh, I get lost in my person. And I'm like, oh, okay, like that sounds so beautiful. But it's also like, wait, but like, do you lose yourself, or just how do you balance the two? Like, how do you balance you as an individual and you as someone in a relationship and like that other person as well,
So I think it takes a lot of presence and intention. I talk a lot about intention in the work that I do with folks. And it actually looks like, if we're always going to be especially when you're in a relationship, there are going to be times where you're like fully into that new relationship energy and it's giving you all you need. And it's like, oh, this feels so good. And I'm loving it. Right. But then there's like your friends are on this, right. And then your friends are on the side and they're like, girl, we haven't seen you in 2 months. Where you at? Or girl, we haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Where you been in the group chat? Right. So I will say this, when it comes to like maintaining who we are and staying connected to who we are when we're in relationship, it actually takes a constant intentional effort every day. I'm a big proponent of asking ourselves questions each day of like, how am I showing up for myself? How am I showing up for other people in my relationships? What does it look like? When's the last time I did the thing that I really loved? So like tapping back into interests, right? Always staying connected to the things that we love and value. But even more so, this might sound hilarious. When it comes to staying connected to who we are, I think it's being able to activate those activities of who we are in community. So like, if you know that you love reading, which I love reading and I love all books, but book clubs, like be in space with other people who love reading. Go to like a silent book reading, like activity thing in your town, go to the beach with people and you all just grab a book and you just sit there and be in community with them. If you know you want to reconnect to, I don't know, skating, right? Like I know a lot of us Black women, we used to skate a lot when we were younger, whether it was rollerblading or something. And we become adults and we're like, you know what?
I could never get up straight. No, I can't relate to that. I'm sorry.
You're so funny. But or like double dutch or like something that was of interest to us.
Yeah.
You're so funny, Rachel. So like, or something that brought us joy when we were younger, reconnecting to it and actually setting aside time to do those things while we're in that relationship. Remember, relationships they add to us, but also you add to you. And you got to remember that you continually add to you. And that doesn't end just because you're now in this relationship where you're sharing that growth and that interest in things, right? Also invite your partner into the things that are of interest to you. And like do that seasonally, like something he loves or they love or she loves with something you love, she loves, like all these things, and give yourself the opportunity to do it as much as possible. And again, it all ties into intention and intentionality. And you know what? Sometimes our friends, they might be like, girl, are you staying connected to you? Take those statements and questions, not as something as like a judgment, but like, am I actually staying connected to the things that I like? And can I do more to reconnect to those things that I like? So just be conscious. And, honestly, that new relationship energy do be getting us. So know that, acknowledge it.
It's okay. Like, bask in it. But no, it's interesting. Like you were talking about like the things we did as children, although you mentioned two things I don't know how to do, but it's okay. The attachment style quiz, the first half of the quiz is all about my childhood, and I was like, oh, like why are they so into like me as a child? Like I'm grown now, or at least I'm trying to be. And like you talk about how like inner child, like joy and like things you experience, like bringing your partner to that. How does like your inner child relate to you in the relationship, and how do you heal both or like have one be, what I'm trying to say? Like, how are they connected?
I do. So this is something I think about all the time. And how I think of the inner child is as another part of you. So when we are talking to people, when we're communicating with our partners, our friends, there is like, think of it as like there are multiple parts of you. And multiple parts of you that are different ages. And sometimes you show up as the adult you. I'm 34. I might be like, yeah, I'm operating from the 34-year-old me. And then there are sometimes when I am in my threat response, when I'm thinking more black and white, and I'm thinking like, right, that I'm like 17. And so the importance of that is like all these different ages of us are within us. And sometimes they stand in front of us in different interactions that might be activating to us, that might connect to our history. Something I always talk about when it comes to conflict, for example, and why it's so important to not shy away from it, but like step into it, is that what's happening in conflict is history and present, like in the present moment, are coming together as one. Ooh. And whether it's history in that relationship or history, your personal history that is tied to familial interactions, the things you did not receive or did receive, the things that you are in opposition to that your parents gave you, or the things that you embrace that your parents gave you. All those things are wrapped up in conflict. And so why it's so important to like stay connected to who you are and like really kind of get a handle on what the inner child is telling you or what it's showing you in that moment, is that sometimes it comes out. Yeah. Sometimes we think we're acting our age and we really ain't. And so the more you get to know about who that younger version of you was, how she responded to things, you could be like, ooh, I don't have to judge that my inner child is coming up. I can say, ooh, that's my 7-year-old responding. And she's telling me that a need is not met. And I need to get resource, and I need to step away, or I need to care for myself, or I need to be in community, or I need silence, or I need to acknowledge my emotional experience in this. If it's like happening in a conflictual experience, right? Like where we so tied up in the content, it's like, ooh, I got to step out and say the context of this. Ooh, I just got really scared. I just got really sad. So the inner child tells us something about what we're experiencing in that moment. It tells us whether or not we're resourced enough. It tells us whether or not we're acting our age. And it tells us if, and so my recommendation is, with whatever it looks like, start to get to know your history, start to get to know the patterns of how you relate, start to get to know those times where you like, ooh, I should have done that differently. Maybe that was a younger version of you showing up that you were kind of surprised about. So it's giving you the opportunity to really reconnect to all those historical parts of you, all those parts of you in the present and how they're showing up based off of how you're experiencing life in that moment. And the stories were making meaning about what life means in that moment too.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna let that sit for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned conflict in relationships, and when I was prepping for this, I was reading an article that you contributed to about like how to handle conflict and healthy conflicts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And because at first you're like, oh, like a really healthy relationship won't have conflict. Like you'll just always be in tune with things and like you'll be like on the same page. But I sat with that, I was like, well, obviously that will never happen because two people, no matter what, there's going to be some type of conflict, but not in like a
Mm-hmm.
negative way, but just like, it just naturally happens. Like we're not the same person. Like I have conflict with myself. So like, how can I not have conflict with other people, And so,
Exactly.
how do you, like if there is conflict in a relationship, how do you like address it? And like, how do you like fight fair in a way, or how do you avoid,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're supposed to avoid conflict, but how do you like address it? I guess, how do you handle conflict?
Yeah. So I will say this, conflict is actually a sign that, I think that you are connected to someone. And here, this is funny. Okay. Let me explain that.
Please.
Um, so when you don't have conflict, you have complacency, or you have, just harmony that's kind of surface. So conflict is when you have harmony and disharmony, right? And you're needing support to have repair to get back to harmony. So the conflict is like, we're in disharmony. We don't know what to do. We are feeling activated. History is coming up and it's making me feel like even more emotionally big about something in the moment of like not feeling. And also conflict is about disconnection. It's about us not feeling seen, heard, or felt by someone. And when we do conflict well, or when we handle or maintain or support ourselves in conflict, it looks like we can set ourselves up for support of, okay, I feel us getting too tight into the words, right? Sometimes what happens in conflict, we're always forcing back and forth this like, I'm right. No, you're right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. Right. We get so tied up about the words. And so my recommendation is a good supportive tool is, okay, hold on. Wow. We just got real wrapped up in those words. Can I tell you what I'm sitting with in the context of this? Can I tell you what I'm feeling? Like, let's not even talk about what just led to this challenge. Can we just hold space for how we got real activated just then? Or talking about yourself, you might say, ooh, when you said that, I felt really sad. Take it out of the words of like the content of the thing and really sit with what's my feeling in this moment? And what did that feeling lead you to make meaning of? When you said that, all I could think about was this thing that you told me last week that made me feel unseen and unheard and disconnected. So conflict is not something we have to be afraid of. If you do it well, what it means to really recover and repair from conflict is you take breaks, you acknowledge how you're feeling, you acknowledge when sometimes your threat response is leaning more towards, I need to be right rather than I need to be connected and close to you. And what I mean by taking breaks is when each of you is getting activated to the point where continuing a conversation will not be fruitful, will not be supportive, will actually lead to more harm. You give yourself a 20-minute, an hour, an afternoon, a morning, 24-hour break. And I'd say like a 24-hour moratorium about like the content. Always come back to one another and say, hey, I just want you to know that I was reflecting on that hard conversation we had and I could see your perspective, or I want to apologize, or do you have a moment for me to share not the content, but just some of the feelings that were coming up for me so that you can get clear about my experience of what was happening in the conflict. And I think it's really important that we know that there are tools, right, that we should practice. And the more we practice them, right, I think I don't know what happened, but we practice everything from sports to instruments, but we're not practicing personal things. Like we're not practicing communication. So I think about this all the time, and I'm like, come on, practice these conversations, y'all, and do it outside. Do it in a place where it's beautiful. The sun is shining on you. Do it on a walk where you are physically feeling your feet hitting the ground. Like you don't have to be doing these conversations. And like, I'm such a big proponent of practice, but like you should be doing this in moments where you like feeling jovial and excited and connected. But to sum all that up, to be effective in moments of conflict is to know how you respond and react, is to get clear about what your threat responses want to lead you to do, which is usually fight, freeze, flee, fawn. Get familiar about what your partners might be. But remember, when you end a conflict or pause it, it's not because you're saying like, oh, so you're not resourced. It's about, oh, I'm actually activated.
Yeah.
We don't put the pause on like, I need you to get better. It's, I need to become better so that I can show up better for us, for myself, and for this relationship with more intention. And just a beautiful causal effect is that your partner gets to do the same. And if you're in alignment, they're doing their perspective taking, they're leaning into their emotionality, they're learning more about themselves as you're doing that. So it's really, oh man, I practice so much with my couples. I practice so much with folks who are seeing me as an individual client, but are working through some relational dynamics. We're practicing conversations all the time. I'm like, all right, so what that felt like? Like, ooh, what you noticed? Did your stomach kind of bubble up? It's all right. It's all right. Did your chest kind of go like, ooh, Dom, I don't know what. So I'm always like, okay, get clear about what your body is telling you. And you could slow down, right? No one says you have to rush through these conversations. And no one says you have to actually be perfect in how you're feeling when you say something. As long as you give yourself the opportunity to say what you need, whether it's in that conversation, in the following, you are standing in your integrity and you're showing your partner your authentic self.
You just dropped so much knowledge right now.
I'll be trying.
I'm so good. I was like, wow. Conversation. Someone's like, I'm like, wow, I can apply so many of these things in my life that I just didn't think like aligned. But I'm just like, yeah, like conflict is really a way to build intimacy. You know, it really is a way to build closeness with someone and like that trust to know that like it may not be perfect, but we're going to figure it out together. I think that's like one of the most romantic things you can do. But sometimes for me, I don't want to like, I want to know when to walk away, you know, cause I feel like I have the desire to like, just keep giving everything I've got to like make it work and like make it like, if you know, like to revive something was like knowing when to walk away. And like, if you have any advice on like how to know when or how to know like, okay,
yes,
we tried and like, this is where I choose myself, you know?
So I do. And this for me is getting to know our deal breakers and getting to resolve the unresolved moments in our relationship with that person or past romantic relationships. So we all have deal breakers. We just haven't defined them as those yet. Deal breakers for me are things that we absolutely will not stand for, that take us out of alignment with who we are in our core beliefs, that take us into a space where we don't feel, it's not even about comfort. It's like we're doing something that goes against what we believe about ourselves. So the deal breaker is, I can give you an example. So the more awareness you're building, the better you'll be able to identify your deal breakers. But the deal breaker might be, you know, I will not fight or I will not have conflict in front of other people. Like if we're in a space, my deal breaker is if you bring up something really challenging in that moment, I don't feel safe, right? Let's say that happens, right? A couple and they talk about it before they go out and then it happens. And one partner is looking at them and they're like, ha 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 ha, right? And you're like, that's my deal breaker. That's a deal breaker. We talked about this. What we get to do for ourselves when we tell our partner what our deal breaker is, hey, this is something I don't like. And it leads me to feel disconnected and disoriented in this relationship. And here's what I need us to do. Either we honor each other and not do this behavior, right? And I'm going to give you chances, or I'm going to tell you a specific time in which, like, I need this to happen as soon as possible. Like, these are invitations for growth. And then we say, you know what? I can't continue. If it continues, we say, I can't continue to live in this relationship where I am feeling disvalued and disconnected. So I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to decide to make my transition out. So getting to know the things that do not feel good for us. And it's not just about discomfort, because I'm going to tell you sometimes what our brain does, it conflates or conflicts, or even like, it's like discomfort and threat become the same thing. So I want everyone to get real clear about what really makes them uncomfortable versus what is actually a threat. And so give yourself an opportunity to know the difference. And really what's going to happen is your deal breakers are the things that lead you into like true threat. Not just like the quick, like fight or flight threat, but like true threat. Oh, this is a threat to my well-being, my understanding, my connection. And I can't continue to be in a relationship that does this to me. Right. It's funny because people always call these like red flags, or like people might think about this as like, this is a red flag for me. And I'm gonna go. I am not a red flag therapist. I don't usually use those terms. I usually use the terms of like, okay, so something's being activated in me that is leading me to sit in something that's unresolved, or like a history that leading me to feel resentment, or like this is my deal breaker and I've talked with, or I haven't talked with my partner about this, and here's an opportunity to name it, or here's an opportunity to rename it and say, listen, I don't want to be out of alignment again. Like, this is something we've talked about and it just happened, and I need it to be honored, because if not, this is going to be something that leads me to leave. We can have those conversations, and we should have them more with our partners about like, here's what I feel good about in our relationship. Here's some of the things that I think are invitations for us to grow. And here are the deal breakers. We're going to have to work on those. If we want to stay connected and relationally close, it's important for us to honor, consent, and confirm like, yeah, we will be very specific, thoughtful, diligent about honoring the deal breakers, and about like honoring for ourselves as well too. So yeah, I think it's getting real clear about who you are, about what you want. And also, again, I'm going to say it is about taking that risk to leave. That's hard for us. It's hard for us because we fear the potential. We want to avoid grief. And unfortunately, we can't avoid it. But if we're in community with people who love us and we are loving on ourselves, we can give ourselves resource in those grief moments.
All about those risks. But I think that's, really tied to the way you mentioned the connection. And like, we've been talking a lot about like vulnerability and like taking risk and like just trying to figure out what establishes like a genuine, healthy connection between two people. And if you could pinpoint it to anything, what would you say is that key thing that is like, it's like makes a good connection between two people?
So I'd say it's one thing that I often talk about all the time is integrity. I'd say it's integrity and congruence, but integrity because we all have personal integrity. We want relational integrity, and integrity is important for us because if we aren't sharing the things that matter to us, the things that make us feel good, the things that didn't make us feel good with our partner, and just assuming that they know because we've been in connection to them for years or months or you name it, we do ourselves a disservice. Uh, so I think integrity is huge. I think it's one of the things that I build up the most in couples. And I think it's all tied to authenticity. It's tied to vulnerability, because you are taking a risk to stand in the truth of what you believe, even though it might be something that kind of leads your partner to feel like, ooh, okay, so it's not something that I knew about. And also, I'm glad I got to hear and I get to honor it now with you, as opposed to assuming that this is what was going on and allowing my behavior to be a response to an assumption. So I'd say integrity and then congruence, really, because we have so many thoughts. And I'm not saying you need to always externalize every thought, but I think the more you live internally and externally aligned, the more your relationship can be authentic. And the more you get to be flexible, the more you are showcasing that it's not just about the good that we're talking about, but we're talking about the good, the bad, the hilarious, the moments where we just chuckled a little bit, the moments where we were out of disconnection, but we got back. Like giving ourselves the opportunity to be fully ourselves inside, outside, and interrelatedly is truly a beautiful thing that we can do for ourselves.
So our theme for this year is all about self-discovery. And this conversation has been so like filled with like self-awareness, self-discovery. What comes to mind when you hear the word self for you?
Interestingly, the first thing that came to mind was like multiplicity. So like there are multiple versions of me within self. And I want to honor all versions of me, even if it's like a part of me that feels a bit juvenile or a bit like extremely mature. Like I want to like honor and allow all the parts of me to sit in front of me, and I would love to smile at all the parts of me and just acknowledge that each part of me, a different age, a different level of knowing and understanding, adds to this beautiful self that I've created.
I love that. It's interesting you say that because like I feel like there's so many parts of me that like only I know, you know, and like it's like it feels so like I feel very protective of those parts. So I'm just like, oh, like there's parts of me that like you said are juvenile, like really goofy, and there's parts that could be really serious, and there's parts that could be like really just like weird, you know, like just really just like strange. And this in that self-discovery journey, I'm always amazed like how much of myself there's still for me to learn, you know, and like the things that like I always think about like, oh, I wonder what like future Rachel's gonna like, what her favorite food's gonna be, or like what she's gonna like love to do, like her favorite hobby and stuff, and just connecting that to like who I am now and who I was in the past. But what have you learned about yourself on your self-discovery journey that you think you could share with our audience?
I've learned that I am good at apology and I'm good at speaking up.
Ooh.
Like it's interesting. And funny enough, I think we moralize, I think we moralize good at, like we say that good at means that it looks a certain way. When I say I'm good at speaking up, I mean, I do it even when I feel like my voice is going to crack because it's important for the person in that moment to hear the truth of what's happening for me on the inside so that it mirrors what they experience on the outside. So I think so I'm good at speaking up and I practice it a lot. And it's something I'm proud of because as much as I invoke it for my clients and as much as I'm asking that of them, I feel really good to know that I do that myself. I feel really congruent around that. And then the other one, I think I mentioned, oh wait, what did I say?
Apologizing.
Oh, okay. Apologizing. Okay. Apology. I actually really value that about myself. For some reason, I think we have negated apologies. I think apologies are one of the most beautiful things that we can do, because it's an acknowledgement that we want to get back into closeness with someone else. And so I'm good at that. And I'm good at not making it about me. I'm good at making it about reconnecting to the person I want to be close to again. And I know that there are times in my apology where I can judge myself a little bit too harshly, but I give myself reconnection to self-compassion as often as I can in those moments of apology. So yeah, those two things are my thing. And I would really invite it for a lot of people because, and I do in a lot of my work, invite people to explore what it means to speak up more and also to apologize more to the people they value, because there's nothing like hearing that you are valued enough to be acknowledged that I might have hurt you. And whether or not the person sees it, like, you notice it. So speak up and acknowledge that that's something you experienced in your interconnectedness. And you want them to know that it's important that they hear the truth of what you've experienced and that you all can move forward with more truth. So those are my things.
Beautiful things. So I literally could talk to you all day. And
I know.
it just, you have such a ease about you and such a warmness that's just like, my girl. I could talk to Dom anytime. But before we wrap up, just want to say thank you. Like, truly, like, the space you create and the work you do is so important. And even in this conversation, I feel very like seen, and I also feel healed. I'm almost like, oh, there's things I could work on too. And like, I'm just excited that like this conversation led me to that. I'm sure whoever's listening will feel the same way I feel, and just want the audience to be able to connect with you after this conversation ends and like find ways to support you and where to find you. So please tell them about you, where they can find you and how they can support you.
Yes. So you all can find me at The Racial Equity Therapist on Instagram. My website is theracialequitytherapist.com. I actually came out with a conversations deck at the end of last year. So again, y'all know how big I am into communication, but this deck is an opportunity for you to have discussion questions at the ready to explore communication and like community and care, love and intimacy, work and finance, and play and rest with different communities that you're in, friends, romantic partners, colleagues. There are questions for it all. So, that's really exciting. And it's also a way that folks who are not my clients can see and experience my work. And then I just want to leave folks with just like this thing that I always think about. I'm such a Bell Hooks and June Jordan fan, but a couple of quotes that I think are really awesome to kind of culminate our conversation today is like, Bell Hooks says, the practice of love offers no place for safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside of our control, but we want love. So we got to risk that. And then June Jordan, I love this one. June Jordan says, to tell the truth is to become beautiful, to begin to love ourselves or love yourself, value yourself. And that's political in its most profound way. And so I give you all those words. Connect with me as you wish, as you can. I'm always writing stuff. So like, look out for my articles. and that's it. Yeah, that's me. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, thanks for listening.
Of course.
Thank you all for joining us for a very special episode of The Unfolding, presented by the Lovin Foundation. At the Lovin Foundation, we are committed to showing up for communities of color in unique and powerful ways, with a particular focus on Black women and girls. Our resources and initiatives are collaborative, and they prioritize opportunity, access, validation, and healing. Since our founding, the Therapy Fund has provided financial support for therapy to over 13,000 Black women, girls, and non-binary individuals across the country. This year, our goal is to provide free therapy to at least 6,000 more. If you'd like to join us and invest in generational change, visit our website at thelovinfoundation.org for ways to give. To stay updated on new episodes and any future programming, follow us on Instagram and Meta, or check out our website at thelovinfoundation.org.